of the SqueezeCast is to essentially give away the answers to the test. Tell people what they need, and specifically the most common things that we hear on the phone. So we talk to people all the time, mostly small and mid-sized business clients, and we talk to them about achieving whatever goal they have, right? And so some of this is like what we've experienced through client conversation after client conversation, and what people see as major hang-ups, major challenges, and then also things where people believe it to be a big problem when in reality it's just not a big deal. So, and we've got three kind of examples we'll go through. So we'll start with a basic home services business, so think like landscaper, plumber, electrician, painter. And then we'll talk through e-commerce, which is really, really common for inquiries that we get, and then we'll talk about a brick and mortar business. So, but yeah, so we'll start with service businesses and start with the obvious thing that businesses need, which is a website.
Website branding package. Yeah, if you're starting out and you don't have a brand, obviously you start with a brand before you get anything else. Getting together your colors, your logo, all your icon sets, making sure that that's in one PDF so you can refer that to whether you're gonna. A lot of times service businesses buy large signs, make sure you have the right vector logos.
Yeah, so that's like the whole brand style guide, right? And for business starting out, that can be as simple as 2 fonts, 3 colors, and a logo.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that gets lost the most, though, is that people get too excited and jump to let me get a sign before they have a logo, and then you spend a couple $100 wrapping a truck or a van, and it's either a pixelated logo or it's not the logo you love, and then you have some brand discrepancy out there when like, oh, I already paid too much money for that van, so we'll push it out, and then you do your branding, and then you have a little bit of a discrepancy in your brand. I think we see that a lot.
Yeah, it's like you kind of we'll see people get ahead of themselves and get excited about the big thing, whether it's the sign or the wrap. And if they just start with basic guidelines of like 3 colors, 2 fonts, a centralized logo, then that expands into all of these other things, whether it's a sign or a wrap or the website itself. So when we talk to potential clients about a website, the first question we ask is if they have branding. And the answers we get are all over the map, to the point where they say things like, we need our brand freshened up is one of the most common things, which is code for there's no freshening up.
There's a rebrand.
So we tend to start with rebrands in a lot of situations where people don't understand that's what they need.
Yeah, 100%.
What are some good examples of people coming in with things they think are branding but is not branding?
Usually a lot of times it's something that they either made themselves, had a family member make themselves, whether it's in a format that's just like a small PNG, and then obviously all the way down to a sketch or.
We've seen drawings on napkins.
Drawings on paper, and a lot of times you hear, hey, just digitize it, and it's really not that easy. You gotta obviously know how to use the software, and super important that you obviously have vector images.
Yeah, that's a big thing, is like, and what we're kind of doing is saying, hey, branding comes first and leads to a website, and this is all the stuff that consider with branding, and we see things all over the map, but really it's as simple as the 3 colors, 2 fonts, and a logo, and the logo only having those colors in it, not having weird gradients and shading. There's these little parameters that we look for in that logo so that people can use it in a bunch of places. They can get it embroidered on something. They can get it screen printed. You can't have 17 colors in a logo and get it put on a T-shirt.
No, you're not gonna be able to screen print anything. The 3 colors obviously is really important. We do branding a little bit differently. We usually leave coloring out to the end for the sole purpose that sometimes you have a really good look to a logo, and the colors that you might have put in might just throw people off. We've found that people are very attached to colors. Colors are a thing. You put red in a logo that they love, and they don't like red, the whole logo seems. So we try to stick with grayscale for the whole first round. which has helped. It took us a while to get to that point to be able to do that, but I think it helps.
That's a good point, is like when you're deciding on the logo, think of the design, the image, and then think of the colors in a different conversation, you know?
Completely different conversation. Can't be the same one.
And there's a bunch of resources out there for getting branding done and a logo done. So we have our process, and typical agency pricing for logos, you'll see anywhere from like $1,500 to somewhere in the $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 range for branding. That's not the only place to get it. That's where you're going to get the best result, obviously, when you've got a team of people brainstorming and working through ideas and discussions for rounds of revision. It's a lot more productive, but that's not the only resource either. You know, you can go to Fiverr and get a logo done and just realize you're kind of going to get one half-assed round of revision, but you get a round of revision and it's going to get you something you couldn't have made yourself. And so I think a lot of people aren't, like there's this misconception you have to work with a professional agency at the very beginning. Yeah. When in reality, if you just put some thought into what your logo should be, a couple of colors and the fonts that make it feel right to you, that gives you a baseline foundation to work on and build these digital, representations of the business. And then starting there and then going to an agency from that point, you've got some vision worked out, you've got some clarity on what the brand image is, and then an agency can take that to the next level. Yeah. So it may be 5 years before somebody can work with an agency, but that doesn't mean they don't have the obligation to work out their brand.
And it's also a huge difference in the fact that if you, in businesses, we're talking about service industry, like a landscaper, let's just say a landscaping company, they're not too worried about what their logo looks like. So it might be advantageous to just go online, if you really like it, get somebody to do it for a lot less expensive if you're going to be happy with it, and then take your budget and come to us and spend it with ads. Yeah. Whereas if you're a company that's going to be creating packaging, I would suggest the opposite. Make sure you spend a lot of time on your brand, because if you're going to hit shelves, you do not want,
that's a good point.
Sloppy. It's really different.
Branding is a lot more important for some businesses over others, and I think there's kind of two variables that define that. Number one is shelf visibility. You just said it. Like if you're going to have something on shelves, you're literally competing with the things next to it on the shelf, and you have to stand out. So your branding has to be great. The other area where branding and really going through a deliberate thought process on how you want to represent the brand, where it's important, is when you're bringing something new to a market that requires you educate people, a new service that people don't know about, a new capability, an invention, right? Yeah. Like something completely new that requires a lot of market education requires great branding as well. But a home service business, what we kind of started the discussion with, like a landscaper, get something that doesn't throw people off, and money's more efficiently spent on finding your new customers,
Yeah, I mean, also, service, something like a landscaper, let's just say you pick a tree, that's usually, there are not going to be too many variations of that logo. If you're creating a brand and you're going to have a product, you are most likely going to need dozens of variations as you create new product sets. So having the array of different Vector and EPS and Adobe Illustrator.
Just kind of considering all of the places that your brand image will end up. Yeah. And if the only place it's going to end up is on a website in a truck for a landscaper, not a real big requirement. But if the brand's going to be on products the size of a golf ball and products the size of a living room couch, and in digital places, in print places, in billboards, potential video placement for advertising. Like the more use cases for the logo, the more you really have to work out a central design and all the different applications. Yeah. And then from that, once you kind of work through that brand image and how the brand's represented publicly, with the branding and logo, colors, that stuff, really, for basically every single business that we talk to, which is, industry independent, really the what dictates whether we have an opportunity to work with a business is whether or not they get any customers online. Yeah. Right? Like whether it's brand visibility, whether they do their sales online, as like digital properties, social media, Google search, wherever that is, has to be a viable opportunity for them to gain new business, and that is nearly every business right now. So what that means is that the next step is the website. And we try and impress this upon people, but the one area that's a public representation of your business that you have complete control over the user experience on, and complete control over the content down to the character is your website.
Yeah.
Like, it's the one digital property where you have all of the control, and ideally, in most cases, that's the place where you take traffic from other places and you want it to end up on that website. So when you characterize it like that, which is how we describe it to clients, you start to realize how important that website is, right? It's the central location that all digital advertising pushes traffic to.
Yep.
It's the one thing you want to be the highest visual representation of the business.
For sure, I agree. And then I would say, in my opinion, the one thing that we probably see and hear the most is like branding is branding, but websites can be anything from you ended up finding out you rented a website from somebody that's not yours when you want to switch, unresponsiveness, if it's coded in a way that you can't edit it. It's super important that you have control of your website.
Yeah.
Very important, because the second that you want to make a change, or the second that you want to kind of redo the website a little bit, if you don't have control of that website, then somebody else does, and you're going to have to start from scratch, and
it's a huge lift every time.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of areas of control. So these are kind of like a checklist, is the domain itself.
Yeah.
In many cases, there are offerings where you can go through someone to get that domain, whether it's the we may have not had audio going in. The good news is there are backup tracks on this. So anyway, we'll pick that back up. So it's good now. But the first area of kind of control of a website is the domain, and that's the www address. So the place you register a domain is called a domain registrar, and GoDaddy, Google Domains, all of the EasyBuilder platforms are their own, like Wix, Weebly, Squarespace. You have domain registrars, and so the number one, the best place to register a domain is Google Domains. It's the easiest. It works with the most things. It's easier to set up your company email that way. That makes everything easier. GoDaddy's fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Fine.
So the best advice is use one of the major domain registrars. The bigger ones tend to have better support and more capabilities. So, but we use Google Domains whenever we're buying a domain, and we always recommend that to our clients. And then
don't let anybody else buy the domain for you.
Exactly. Go do that yourself.
Buy your own domain, yeah.
Because then you have it registered in your name. You can make sure there's privacy protection on it, so you get less telemarketing calls and solicitations, but you register the domain. So then there's the next level of website control is the host. And the host is just where the site files live. You can't really do that yourself. There's some people out there like Bluehost and GoDaddy does hosting, but really it's best to work through your agency for hosting. Whoever builds your website is typically going to be able to give you the guidance for hosting, and that's one where we recommend you don't do it yourself. Yeah. The person building your website should do the hosting, and if you're building your website yourself, it's likely on one of those EasyBuilder platforms where hosting's included, right? So all of the Wix, Weebly, Squarespace types of EasyBuilders, hosting's built into that package, but with WordPress like we build on, you have to have a defined host, and so that's pretty simple.
The one I guess exception would be Shopify, but yeah.
And Shopify falls into the EasyBuilder platform category where they kind of provide their own hosting.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I call it EasyBuilder, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like hosting's included in the content management system. So. And then there's the content management system itself, and that's WordPress, Shopify, Weebly, Wix, Squarespace. All of those are content management systems. The most important thing with that is just making sure, as a business owner, that you have your own administrative permissions, can see everything, can change everything, log in to that content management system. Because that's the access that lets you take that site from whoever controls it and hand it to somebody else. So it's that administrative login to the content management system that dictates who owns the actual site, because that's who can take all the content and put it somewhere else. And if you have somebody build it for you, it's just important you work through early in the discussion, once this site is done and built, who owns it? If I leave you, do I take the site with me, or does the site stay with you and I got to get a new one built? That's like the most important question.
Yeah, correct, yeah. We always start every conversation with, when we start a website, with do you plan to host with us? You don't have to answer that now, but when we get to the point where we're going to launch the website, there's two options. We already have the site files on the development site on our server. We could just launch it and you could host through us. Or you own the website. After the final, payment is made, we can package up those files and then you can place them on a different server. We like to know that ahead of time just because it makes the launch completely different.
Yeah, so the point of that is like, no matter who's building your website, whether it's a freelancer on Fiverr, whether it's an agency, whether it's the most reputable website builder and designer in the world, ask who owns it when it's done. Ask about hosting, where's it going to live, who's going to control it, who's responsible for what. Because most of the situations that we find where they're just like a sob story with a website of how much money went into it, how much time and work, and they lost everything, almost all of them come down to the fact that the client didn't realize they were renting a site, they didn't own it.
Yeah, I think outside of maybe SEO, website design is the Wild West of.
Yeah, it's.
You can call yourself a web developer, and you could have built one site. So I would say one piece of advice is to look at other sites that were built by the team and make sure that you like them, because a lot of times, you can develop and code a site and make it look however you want, but a lot of times, you fit into that one design box. So make sure you look at other sites that people have made. Yeah,
that's a good point. Is website development and search engine optimization are the two areas where you're most likely to be taken for a ride.
Yeah, because it's the two things that most people know what a brand is. They know how to make art in some way. A lot of times people have no idea how to make. Where do you begin if a website? I mean, if you didn't know how to build a website, you really wouldn't know where to go, and you can't just set up a dev environment and get rolling on it tomorrow. If you have, so you have to. There's a learning curve there, just like in SEO, Wild West, where there's no certification really needed.
Yeah, and the more technical it is, both of these things are very technical.
Yeah.
The more technical it is, the more someone can pull the wool over your eyes and kind of talk something away without you getting all of the answers you need. So we encourage people to ask questions, ask detailed questions that almost seem awkward, like you're pushing too much. Like when you ask about their portfolio and capabilities, ask for websites they've built, and then once they send them, say, okay, did you build this or did someone else on your team build this?
Yeah.
And when was this built, right? Because if it was built 8 years ago, it's not the same team building the website, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, we found examples where someone gave a list of websites in their portfolio that they didn't build. They just used that list to say, I can build stuff like this, which you don't know that that's the case.
No, yeah, I mean, for sure.
So when it comes to the website specifically, that's where we say ask all those awkward questions, get into the weeds, and work all of that stuff out before any money changes hands.
Yeah, and also the as far as pricing goes, websites are by far the biggest scale, because a lot of times, people come to us, they'll say, hey, I need a website, how much does it cost? Functionality is everything on a website. That you can have a website that's just informational, a couple pages, contact form, simple, all the way up to 1,200 products.
Yeah.
So that scale of there's really no good answer to how much does a website cost until you come to that meeting prepared with what do you want on the website? What functionality do you want? You want a booking agent? Are you going to collect money?
There's kind of two sides of what a website costs, is what you need the website to do, how you need it to look, all of that, because that kind of dictates what work is required. And then there's who you're talking to about that website, because there's kind of a whole range in this market, and it starts with individual freelancers, and those are people you find on Fiverr. Those are individual. You might find them on Craigslist. You can find them on social media posting about making websites. A lot of times they'll have their own website with a portfolio, but it's an individual freelancer. Those websites, there's a wild range, but it tends to be between 500 and 5,000 for individual freelancers. And you really do kind of get what you pay for. You're leveraging the expertise and experience of one person. But because it's one person, they don't need to pay the overhead of a team, right? So you get some price efficiencies, but you get those limitations. And then you get into the range of these really experienced, sometimes industry specialized freelancers. and smaller, newer agencies kind of fall into this range as well, where you get either the experience of somebody who's built a bunch of websites or maybe has industry-specific experience, or you get the experience of a team full of people at an agency. And that range tends to be in like the $3,500 to $9,000 range.
Yeah.
You know? Then you get into mid-size agencies, and it goes up from there. And Squeeze kind of falls in that mid-size agency range, where our pricing, highly dependent on website capability, tends to be between around $8,000 or $9,000, and then up from there up to mid-20s, even $30,000. You get somebody with 5,000 products for an e-commerce website.
Or if you need a back end with like
database on the back end, invoicing functions on the back end. If your entire customer relationship management software runs through the website, there's things like that where you add complications, and it adds 100 hours to the project.
Oh, yeah,
so,
but in my opinion, I work way more on the front side with creative. I would say the number one, if you were to order things around of like what should I save money on, I'd say the number one thing to not save money, go cheap on, is the website.
Yeah, go big on the website.
If you're looking to budget money and put aside money towards certain like buckets, the website is going to be your most valuable asset, because it just connects to everything. You know, your brand is obviously going to be connected to your website, but as you know, like in the digital side, you're going to be sending people to that website.
The way it's built, the expertise with which the website is built, all of that's really important because it affects data tracking. It affects your ability to see people converting on your website or not. And when it's built well and designed well, that website lasts 6 to 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, and so. And when it's built poorly and designed poorly, that website lasts a year and a half, but only costs half to 2/3 as much as a well-built website. So what you end up with is, by doing a website right the first time, you end up saving a ton of money on a 5 to 10 year time frame. And then the other area, I'd say like the two biggest areas where you put money early are website, and then whatever marketing effort is highly likely to bring those first customers.
Yeah.
Right? And so like, that's where you get into the question of, well, what the hell is that marketing effort? And that gets a little bit more in the weeds, because it's different for every business in every market. You know, this is where we can kind of start to split into the service business versus a brick and mortar retail business versus e-commerce, because you know, that's where talking to an agency really starts to become advantageous, is because you get experience in strategy design.
Yeah.
And that is difficult to gain in any other way through doing it over and over and over and iterating that process and seeing the data and the results. And so when it comes to figuring out, because like branding's done, website's done, what do we do from here to get sales? That question, it's worth, even if you don't go work with an agency long term, it's worth paying for an hour or two of consulting with an agency just to design that initial strategy. Because if an agency says, hey, you need to get your website to the top of Google rankings in Charleston for lawn mowing, and you need to run some Google ads, right? If you know that that's the strategy, which by the way, that's the strategy for every damn landscaper in the country, is do good SEO, run good Google search, Google local service ads, and you will book out for the rest of the year, you'll buy a boat, you'll buy a bigger house, and live happily ever after. So if you know that's the strategy that works because it's proven in your industry, once you know that, then you have options and you can take action, right? So it's that initial strategy. And this is episode 1 of the SqueezeCast, but one of the goals of this is to give all of those strategies out through this channel, where we say, hey, this episode's going to be on a landscaping company, and we're going to say, ABC Landscaping Company in anywhere USA, this is how we would design the entire strategy, this is how much money we would spend, this is where we put it. So that's coming on the channel, but that's where it's really worth talking to an agency, talking to a consultant, and figuring out what that initial marketing strategy is, because once that's figured out, there's a ton of things you can do on your own. There's a ton of info you have to hire the right freelancer. And so for those local service businesses, it really comes down to search visibility.
Yeah. No,
Like,
I agree.
I mean, when you know, like what happens, what are the first 3 things you do when a pipe bursts in your house?
Yeah, you Google local plumber in Charleston, plumber near me.
Every single person does that. And so those kinds of searches will be 80% of your business in one of those local service businesses. And that's plumbers, electricians, HVAC, roofers, landscaping, even getting into higher dollar things like in-ground sprinkler system installs, irrigation stuff, right? Renovations. Like you can get all of your $100,000 home renovation clients through Google Ads and SEO and good reviews.
Yep.
You know, and so those local service businesses, it really is search engine optimization, Google Ads. It gets a little bit more complex. That's kind of the easiest industry for us to manage and really do well for clients because it's such a straightforward strategy. When you get into brick and mortar retail and e-commerce retail, it starts to get a little bit more complex because you really have to look at what the products are and who the demographic is. So when you're selling something, a product, I would do a deep dive on who buys this product and benefits most from it, and not just the one perfect person, but like 3 to 5 different case studies, right? Because once you do that analysis and understand who really benefits from the product, then you have a basic set of demographic categories, you know, moms with kids between 8 and 16 or whatever that is. You know, we have a aqua park here that where it's very clear we advertise to parents of kids who enjoy aqua parks, right? So the demographics are easier for some than others, but figuring out who that demographic is and how to show the product or what you sell to them in a way that kind of maximally shows that benefit. So that gets a little more complicated.
That's where video really comes in. I think it's nice to have a good set of videos, especially if you have something like Charleston, like the aqua park, really engaging, really fun, families, all summer long, not expensive, but you can go there the whole day. And if you just heard the words aqua park, you might not know what that means, but seeing a video, you're like, wow, I should get the power of video in some of these is incredible.
Yeah, and video does a lot for retail too because it gives someone insight into the shopping experience, especially with brick and mortar retail. The experience in the building, in the store actually matters to people. And the more familiar you can make them with that before they have to step foot in the store, the more likely you're going to get them through the front door. So that media in your advertising is really important. And that kind of dictates what platform you put it on, right? When you want to focus media, when you have a pretty product, when you have a cool storefront, social media platforms allow you to showcase that. So we really look at social media as primary for retail, especially when it comes to building brand awareness and product awareness in an area. Social media lets you do that with all the video and media capabilities, more in-depth descriptions of things, and really what it leverages is the ability to target a type of person. Whereas, you know, when we go on search to advertise for a landscaper, we're targeting what the need is, right? But when we go on social media to advertise for a retailer that sells cute bags in the summer, like beach bags or something, we're targeting the kinds of people who would buy a bag for the beach, right? People who go to the beach, people who live in beach areas, and we want to show them the product. We're much more likely to reach a lot more people in the target demographic that way than if we just target searches for beach bags. Especially when that product is not a primary thing, not a need to have, you know? If you run a gas station, get on Google Maps, that's a need to have. People can't just decide to not buy gas. But when we're talking about luxury items, nice to have items, those kinds of things will do well with media on social media. We lost our behind the scenes cam.
What happened?
It just ran out of battery probably.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so like that like choosing your, now it just released the tension on the thing. That's it flopping dead.
It's like,
But yeah, like when we talk about where you get, like we talk branding, we talk website, then we talk about spending money where you're going to get those first customers. And what I would say is take the time to do the analysis so you can be very confident in putting the majority of your budget into that bucket you know will bring customers. So when we get into, in later episodes, specific business case studies, we'll get into that. But you know, using landscaping as an example, you need to put all of your money for those first customers into Google Ads and SEO. When we use a e-commerce retailer as an example, you need to put all of your money to get those first customers into Instagram ads. You know, like there's proven avenues where you will get revenue depending on what kind of service or product you have and the kind of person who wants that or would want that service or product. And so that's where going out and getting that expertise, I mean, that expertise is on YouTube, it's just harder to filter.
Yeah.
You can get it straight from the source if you talk to an agency and pay for a little bit of consulting, but doing that research to define what that primary platform for first business is, and that's kind of like the 3 steps to getting off the ground, is like define the branding, get that website, the right website, looking the way it needs to look, the best representation of the company, and then put budget into that primary platform, the primary campaign that will bring your first transactions. And then from there, you know, you work on optimizing, lowering your cost of acquisition for new customers, looking at secondary and tertiary platforms that can add more business, more brand awareness, and we can get into that. But it's like those first 3 steps are what it takes to get off the ground and get to revenue.
In that order. I think, you see, I know I'm the exact way where, like, if I start something, I'm like, oh, let's do all this stuff. Let's just get everything out there. And it takes a lot to learn. Like, I was just talking the other day, somebody just bought a business locally, has 2 locations, and wanted to just like, let's get some ads, and you know, it's like, you think you're gonna change your name, and it was like, maybe. And I was like, well, let's take a step back, let's figure out if you're gonna change your name first. If we're not gonna change our name, let's get the branding right, let's get the website right, then put some money into ads, because you start, you know, it gets confusing if you start running ads to it, and then somebody looks for the same place, it's not there anymore. I just think it's really important in that order, branding in order, website exactly as you want, choose the avenue that you want to throw your money into to advertise. That's going to be the most effective. And I do think that also comes around to why I think it's important that we, when we started Squeeze, wanted to be a one-stop shop, because I don't feel like having a specialty agency, special agencies are great, and that's amazing, they do incredible work. But I think having everything under one roof was important, because you can have the consultation. We have people that can talk to you about your brand. Then you can go into the next room and talk about your website. Then you can go into the next room and talk about digital advertising, and not have that disconnect.
When all of that stuff, especially branding and website, like
it's very important.
Having because what, you know, and I like what you bring up with in that order, right? Like, I would even say go so far as don't think about the website until you're happy with the brand. 100%. And then don't think about first transaction until you're happy with the website. Yeah. And, you know, plan the budget. Yeah. Plan what you planned on spending on that, but don't think about taking action on website or advertising campaigns until the brand is good. Yeah. Advertising campaigns, wait till the website is good. And then you won't just save money doing that, but you'll save a lot of time. Yeah. Because things get lost in the weeds when you're trying to do all 3 of those at once, and things get out of order, and you end up double working things, going back and redoing ads, changing display ads and video ads to add updated branding, and it ends up costing twice as much.
Yeah, and it's just kind of twice as frustrating, because you're kind of wasting money if you're showing people, you know, a brand that you're not happy with, and you might lose them as a customer as well.
Yeah, so I think that'll wrap up our first, like, what you need to go to market. Branding first, then website, then the advertising marketing campaigns that are nearly guaranteed to bring those first transactions. So that last step takes more research than the previous 2, but those are really the first 3 things that we run into with businesses all the time. And that's a conversation we probably have 3-4 times a week.
Yeah, and with the piece of advice being, don't be afraid to be annoying. Make sure that it is the way you want it.
Ask the questions.
A lot of times it's like, well, I already had a couple revisions, I think I'm good. We always say, like, we want you to love your brand, because if you don't, then it's just not going to work, and it's going to flow into the website, and you're like, I'm just not really happy with that. Ask all the questions. Have all of the you know, constructive criticism that you can until you're 100% happy with the branding. Move on to the website, same thing. All the functionality that can work within your budget, do it.
And a great indicator of whether you're working with the right person is how they react to those questions, right? Sure. If you're asking questions that are truly oriented towards being as happy as you can be with your brand, being excited about your brand, and you get pushback on those questions, that's a really clear indicator you're working with somebody who either isn't passionate about what they do to really provide the best product, or doesn't have the capability to do what you need done. And so that's why I go back to ask all those questions before money changes hands and see what kind of insight you can get into whether it's the right fit by how they respond to those questions. But
yeah, and it happens often, but my favorite part of this is when we sit around a table and all of us, including Squeeze people and the client, are both like, oh, I love this. I love the way this brand looks.
And that's when we know it's time to move to the next step.
We all love this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Call it good?
I think so.
What do we end the podcast with? All right, now go squeeze your business.
2 claps and a Ric Flair.